Chapter 41. Ah! I screamed out loud with a frowning face without knowing my nose bleeding, and I was in shock. What? What is? The ones that hit my face fiercely and bounced. It was just a ball. A leather ball that children kick and play well. Wahaha! I stare blankly at the ball rolling around absurdly, and the familiar sound of laughter sticks into my ear. That dog. Belsac, walking towards me, grabbed his stomach and laughed. Of course, there is a stallion who is attached like goldfish poop. Look at that. Fuck. Belsac pointed his finger at me. I frowned because of the fever, but I could still feel something running out of my nose. Nosebleed. With my nosebleed, I confirmed that the ball hit me hard. Belsac, who came right in front of me, see me and began to roll around and laugh. Nosebleed. Astalio, the coward, was just amazed, unable to do anything, and just stand up, looking at the smiling Belsac. What are you doing? I shouted. You're a crazy dog. That heat spreads up to my head. What? Dog? Belsac twisted his face violently, but he didn't even move. Let's try to erase the impression of being small. I can't go on like this. The ball has already rolled away, and the only thing I can get right now is the dirt from the ground. If so, I can use this one. I grabbed the dirt with my hands and sprinkled it on Belsac's eyes. Ah, my eyes! Belsac grabbed his face and rubbed it to remove the dirt from his face. I patted my shirt, stood up, and shouted, Hon, I like it. I was hit pretty hard with the ball, and my nosebleed wasn't stopping yet. I was a little scared to see red blood on my hands, even after wiping it, but I couldn't put a spot in front of this dog's child. I planned to laugh at Belsac, who screamed because of his sore eye. By the way, It was weird. For a moment, my vision was shaken, and then Belsac and Astalio, who was restless next to me, overlapped with each other. Is it because of the ball? Or is it bleeding? My eyes turned around. Oh, that was why I couldn't avoid Belsac's hand pushing my shoulders with a tearful face. I fell back hard again. You! Belsac didn't think about what he had done. He was just angry and energetic. He looked around and found a wooden sword tied to Astalio's waist. Astalio, who hadn't taken swordsmanship classes but always carrying it as a toy. However, even if it wasn't a real sword, it is still a weapon. That's mine. But when Astalio hesitated, Belsac reached out and pulled a wooden sword from Astalio's waist. Silence! Belsac held the wooden sword as tightly as possible. Looks like it will be used to hit me and will break one of the bones at any time. Yeah, he tries to hit me. I closed my eyes tightly, try to forget the pain afterward. At that time, something seems to blow through the wind and Belsac screamed loudly. Ah! It was a different scream than before. When I opened my eyes, Belsac was holding his arm, and the wooden sword and wooden swords have fallen to the floor. Tia! It was the twins calling my name out loud. I think the swordsmanship class was over. It was quite a long distance, but the two who ran quickly stood between me and Belsac. Tia, are you okay? Myron carefully looked at my prone face, and the moment he saw my face, his eyes widened in astonishment. Tia, how can you be like that? Blood! Gilyu! Myron's face became so white, he called Gilyu, who has put a wooden sword at Belsac and Astalio. And when he saw my blood-stained face, Gilyu's eyes turned upside down. You, Belsac! Gilyu's hand, who's holding the wooden sword, trembled, gritted his teeth, clenched his fists, and tried to stab the wooden sword into Belsac's neck, who was crying in pain. Stop it, Gilyu! I said urgently. I wanted to shout out loud, but I'm dizzy, so it doesn't work. Fortunately, Gilyu heard my small voice and stopped immediately, and quickly came to me. Tia, I said when grabbed Gilyu's sleeves. You can't hit him. If you hit that motherfucker, if you beat him hard, it's not fair for me. I have to pull out everything that can be pulled to him. But before I could say anything, I gradually lost my consciousness. I don't think I have hit Belsac while I'm fainting. Considering the usual twin personality, it's good enough. No. Eventually, I leaned my head in Gilyu's arms and fainted. Tia! Gilyu and Myron's faces turned blue. His eyes looked trembling to see Florentia's white face, which was covered in red blood. You, Belsac, you, Myron said with terrifying eyes. Belsac and Astalio flinched, couldn't say anything, and avoided Myron's eyes. Myron, come on, we have to take Tia to the senator. If Gilyu hadn't shouted at the time, Myron would have taken the wooden sword that fell to the ground and beat Belsac and Astalio until they pray that will never touch Florentia again. Myron stared at the two and made Florentia lean on Gilyu's back. We have to go. Gilyu stood up with Florentia and shouted. Myron also ran with one hand, supporting Florentia's back. The weight is too light. Gilyu, carrying her cousin's younger sister, muttered while tightly closing his lower lip. Tears suddenly fall from his eyes. For them, she was always bright and cheerful, and sometimes even scary, so she seemed to be a few years old. Although her body was smaller than her peers, Florentia, who was on his back without strength, was too light and fragile. Myron's face was already messed with tears and the runny nose. Belsac, I'm not going to leave you alone. Myron was thinking the same thing. Why does Dr. O'Malley's office feel so far away today? The servants and Lombardi officials stopped walking when they saw the twins crying and running with Florentia. However, the two 11-year-olds couldn't even think of asking for help from them, and they were running with their suckling power, with the conviction that they must bring Florentia to the hospital immediately. Dr. O'Malley, Doctor, Tia is hurt. When they finally arrived, the twins shouted. Dr. O'Malley jumped, surprised. What happened? The doctor seems to be pounding and surprised at the appearance of the Shannonette twins and Florentia. Come on, lay down here. They are the twin of Shannonette, who is the strongest among the siblings, and the only Galliahan daughter, who is becoming a hot topic now. The idea of not taking wrong actions quickly appeared. After the twins retreated, the doctor pulls the curtains and carefully looked at Florentia's condition. The nose was not broken, but there was a slight bruise and no other wound. Nose bleeding had already stopped. Still, in case he did not know, the doctor took off Florentia's clothes and looked closely and sighed a little while locking the buttons again. There were no other problems. Something hit her nose, causing a mild concussion and a lot of nose bleeding, which made her faint for a moment. Meanwhile, the twins' voice was heard outside the curtain. The doctor covered the blanket for Florentia, opened the curtain and came out. Is Tia okay? The twins, who were sitting in another bed, running and asked. Miss Florentia will be fine. Don't worry too much. Thank God. Gilio and Mayron were relieved and wiped tears with the back of their hands. But it's also for a while. They cried again because they were relieved. Phew. Dr. O'Malley, who sighed and audibly called a servant, and after a while, bang, the sliding door of the lab opened wildly with a loud noise. It was Lombardy's Lord Lulac, who walked in with a stiff face. Dr. O'Malley, amazed while writing Florentia's medical journal, stood up from the seat, unintentionally looking at Lulac's face, and then quickly lowered his head again. Even though he didn't know any mistake, his heart was beating impatiently. The mood of Lulac was terrifying. Even the twins couldn't even make a joke and stood quietly. When Lulac walked in, it feels as if this small treatment room is full. Is the child okay? Yes, Miss Florentia seems to wake up without any problem if she takes a little rest, Dr. O'Malley replied quickly. Lulac looked at her granddaughter laying uncomfortable in bed. His eyes still stared at the black blood-stained dress. And soon after Shannonette arrived, half running and taking a little breath. Mother! Ah! The twins jumped into Shannonette's arms and burst into crying again. What happened to this? Shannonette asked, patting the twins back. That, after the swordsmanship class over, I was on the way to find Tia. Belsac was hitting Tia with a wooden sword, so we ran and saved Tia. Tia lost her consciousness. With a wooden sword? Hit? Shannonette asked back in surprise. She knew Belsac hated Florentia, but fighting between cousins and wielding a wooden sword was a completely different story. That's why we tried to hit Belsac too. Tia told me not to do that. While panting, she tells us not to hit Belsac. Tia is such a good girl. The twins cried again, making a loud noise because the blissful feelings of that time had returned. Shannonette noticed Lulac while appeasing the twins. It would be better if he was angry. It's worse when he's quiet like that. Just as expected, Lulac, who was quietly listening to the twins, ordered the servant next to him, ask Vis and Belsac to come to my office. End of chapter 41. Chapter 42. When Lulac's servant had just found Vis was just getting on the courage to return to the mansion. He was having a social gathering outside and was on his way to the Lord's office to confirm a ridiculous word he was heard. My father looking for me? Yes, that's right. However, the servant who delivers the words looks strange. Avoiding the eyes and blurring the words, something is bound to happen. That's great. I had something to ask too. Vis murmured in courage, heading to the mansion. After arriving in front of the office, Vis hid his discomfort and knocked, then entered the office. Father, I heard you were looking for... Vis, who had just finished greeting, found his son Belsac standing alone in front of the table. Belsac, what's wrong with your arm? A white bandage was wrapped around his son's arm, which was fine until he left the mansion in the morning, and the splint sticking out from under his hand. Father, what's going on? Sit down. Lulac answered the question with an order. As Vis sat on the chair next to Belsac, Lulac said in a stern voice, Belsac, do you understand your fault? Belsac was silent, just bowing his head down. It was a stubbornness not to admit his wrongdoing. Lulac choked his tongue at the sight of such a grandson, and looking at Vis, he said, Belsac hit Florentia with a wooden sword. Thanks to him, she's lying in the hospital with her nosebleed and passed out. As a father, you tell me. Only then did Vis, who had a rough idea of the bandage and situation on Belsac's arm, answered, without showing any remorse. What happened to Belsac's arm? It was because the Shannonette's twin trying to protect Florentia. So where are they now? Since they made Belsac's arm like that, aren't they supposed to be here apologizing to Belsac? On the other hand, his tone of rebuttal was quite different from usual. V's voice, which he couldn't even talk back to his father, was filled with anger. Lulac was speechless at the sight. Even the desire to scold has disappeared. There was a certain amount of anticipation. No matter how self-indulgent Vis is, he must know how to learn his son's fault. But Lulac was disappointed again this time. Rather than worrying about his son, he could only find a vigorous appearance as if he would punish the twins. Lulak, looking at his eldest son with cold eyes, said to Belsac, who stood between his father and grandfather, "What you did today is totally unacceptable, Belsac. Whatever you think, Florentia is your cousin, and a member of Lombardy, and in Lombardy, my words are law." Belsac's very tense shoulders flinched. He thought he'd to say he didn't hit Tia with a wooden sword, as the twin said. He just hit her in the face with a leather ball, but he shut his mouth again. It was because he thought he'd get in more trouble if he protested like that now. "The last time I told you to stop ignoring or harassing Florentia. Do you remember?" "Yes." Belsac's voice became even smaller. Fortunately, there is no resentment like his father did. Lulak's anger faded slightly from his eyes. "Because of your actions, against my word, today your father will pay Florentia a huge amount of compensation." "Father?" Vis cried out in tears, but Lulak didn't even look at him. "Also, Belsac, you are prohibited from approaching Florentia in the future until there are other words from me." "He is prohibited just because the children have a little argument with each other." Vis raised his voice. "Are you against my judgment now?" Lulak's voice was lowered. Only then did he shut up, but his eyes were still full of complaints. "Get out." Lulak ordered Belsac to leave. Belsac, who drooped his shoulders and looked at Vis once, left the office helplessly. No employees were coming and going in the quiet hallway. As he moved away from the office, his gloom gradually disappeared and Belsac felt anger. "This is not fair. She's only got a little nosebleed. I broke my arm." Belsac rolled up his fist and squeezed it. Grandfather's cold gaze kept popping up. "It's all because of her. Because of that girl. Ah!" Just around the corner, Belsac tripped over something that popped out. "Kudang!" As he fell, his broken arm hit the wall and Belsac was too sick to scream. "Oh my God, it must be hurt." There was a voice of laughter. "Well, you don't look too sick." Standing in front of Belsac on the floor were Gilyu and Mayron. "Hey, Belsac, does the broken spot hurt a lot?" Belsac was so frightened that he couldn't answer and nodded. Then the wooden sword that Mayron was holding suddenly pointed under Belsac's neck. "Hicks!" Belsac shrugged heavily at the cold touch beneath his chin. "A broken arm hurts so much. What about a leg with thicker bones?" As Gilyu leaned down and whispered, Mayron's sword moved accordingly to the shin of Belsac. "Ha, don't do that. I'm sorry. Why are you apologizing to us?" "That's right. It's Tia you have to apologize for, right?" The twins were about to grab Belsac by the collar and take him to Florentia. Belsac said with a tremor, "My grandfather told me to stay away from the beach. No, Florentia, so I can't even apologize." It was a very clumsy excuse somewhere, but the twins' faces brightened up. It was because they liked that Belsac could not come near Florentia. "Yeah, that's great. Stay away from our Tia. Listen to grandfather." The twins giggled among themselves as if they had heard a funny joke. "But that's also for a while," Mayron said as he tapped Belsac's chin with the end of the wooden sword. "If you don't listen to him, here's next." "I'm here," Gilyu said, kicking the opposite shin with his toes. "Oh, I see." Belsac nodded quickly. "Then get well soon, cousin." Gilyu greeted Belsac, but deliberately hit his injured arm. "Oh!" The sound of Belsac's groaning and the twins' laughter mixed together in a quiet hallway. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. At the same time, in the residential office, Belsac went out, and the inside was engulfed in silence. Lulak had already begun to look at the documents as if Vis did not exist in this space, and Vis was feeling more humiliated by this. He shook his head, his trembling hands clenched into fists, and said, "Not only do you punish me, but you also punish my son too." Lulak's eyebrows, which were about to be signed, wiggled once. "What do you mean?" "I know everything. You changed the Lombardi scholarship meeting to the day I took Belsac into the palace. The news was the reason why Vis was returning to the mansion." Lulak did not deny it. As a result, V's voice rises. "You can't ignore me like this. My rank as the eldest son falls. So is it Galyahan's work?" "Galyahan?" Lulak raised one eyebrow to the name of the third child that popped out of nowhere. "You've given him a boost to that ridiculous clothing store. You're ordering clothes for useless employees." "What? A ridiculous clothing store? Did it look like that to you?" "It's just a clothing store for the common people. Anyone can do that much, and yet my father sided with Galyahan. I know you're trying to punish me." "So that's enough for him to say." Lulak burst into a laugh and said, "If it's so easy, you should try it, Vis. Get out of this family fence and make your own achievements as much as you're ever done." Vis trembled at the word of blatantly comparing himself and Galyahan. "You're so mean, father. I can't believe it. Am I offended you, father? You just don't like me being close to the imperial family, right?" "Vis, my father didn't empower me as the eldest son. If I didn't do this to borrow the power of the imperial family, then what else? Now, even the reason for being close to the empress was attributed to Lulak." Lulak, who was still listening to his son's pathetic story, put down the flug pen he was holding and said, "Say it for sure. Have you ever had a drink with Jovains? You are not close to the imperial family. You are close to Angenas. Well, that's your greatest sin." Lulak's index finger was pointing to V's. The voice became lower and the surrounding air seemed to get heavier. "It is your sin that you dare to let Angenas show interest in our Lombardy work." V's, who had been arguing vigorously a little while ago, suddenly felt a cold sweat flowing behind his back. It was because he realized that his father was very angry now. "How dare you, Angenas?" Lulak stared at V's. At this moment, V's was not his son, just a member of stupid Lombardy who defamed the family. V's stepped back half a step without realizing it. Before taking away the Browns' land like a fox, they wandered around the barren western part of the country. Those bastards who only knew how to cling to their lineage. "Oh, father," V's tried to apologize. He tried to relieve his father's anger, even by kneeling down and begging for his hands. But his body was stiff, and he didn't even feel like it. Lulak, who was shooting out terrible anger, called V's. "V's, yes, Lord. Don't make me take what you have in your hand now." V's chest sunk harder than ever. Although he was the eldest son, all that was given to V's now was given by his father. Being able to take everything away from himself with a word at any time, with one gesture, it was Lulak Lombardy who could kick himself out of Lombardy. And this Lombardy scholarship banquet is your choice. All you have to do is send your wife and Belsac to the palace. You choose whether you're at the palace or the banquet. V's eyes shook. Already, the Empress knows that he is bringing Belsac. If he disappointed her expectations and attends Lombardy's banquet, everything he has accumulated may gone. But at the same time, his father seemed to have bones in his words. After standing there for a while and dithering, V's bowed and left the office. Lulak, who seemed to keep looking at the documents without paying attention, sighed deeply at the sound of the door closing and dropped the documents. Just a moment ago, where did the angry face who pushing V's go? He looked at the door where his son had left with a complicated look. End of chapter 42. Chapter 43. When I opened my eyes again, it was already dark. Wow, I've slept too long. I'm trying to get up, and my body is frowned upon. As soon as a small sound came out of my mouth, someone ran in full swing. "Tia, are you okay?" It was the voice of a worried father. "Dad?" "Yes, Tia, it's Dad." My father's familiar touch stroked my hair. "Why am I still here?" "I was just hit by the ball and fell down. I also bleed some nosebleeds, but that's all. In fact, there was a time when I awake, but the bed is very comfortable. At that time, there were no twins already, and because it was quiet, it was good to relax, so I had to sleep more and get up later. And this time, when I opened my eyes, I didn't know I would be lying here until dark like this. My Tia seemed to be sleeping well, so I was waiting for you to get up." "Don't do that and wake up. Wake me up instead, Dad." Still, it's a little embarrassing that I slept without hesitation while making my busy father wait. My father shook his head and laughed at me. "This is not a big deal, but I wish you had a good rest." I also make my father worry. It wasn't a big deal, but it must have been a lot of surprises because I fell down. I laughed as I tried to relieve my father's worries, but my father's eyes even sadder. I heard a story from Shannonet's sister. Belsac hit you with a wooden sword." "Eh? Wooden sword?" "I got a nosebleed because I was hit by the ball in the face." It turned out that Belsac picked up Astalia's wooden sword at the end, but you told the twins not to hit Belsac. My father's warm hand swept my forehead once again. "Why are you so good, my daughter?" "That's it. I mean, it would be better if you took care of your greed a little more." "A little more?" I tried to figure this out by blinking my eyes. So people seem to have misunderstood the situation before I fell. The reason I fell wasn't that Belsac wielding a wooden sword, but because I was struck by a ball thrown by him. Belsac couldn't even swing the wooden sword, and the meaning of the word "don't hit Belsac," which I was about to fall, wasn't such a kind word. It meant, "because my nose bleeds, I'm not going to let him stand still, so prepare yourself." Everyone seems to have misunderstood. My father was looking at me with eyes that seemed to see the best angel in the world. Perhaps that's the same with other people who have heard his story. People like the twins, Shannonette, and grandfathers. The excuses made by Belsac or Astalio would not have been accepted. Maybe it has already spread out loud in the Lombardy mansion. How do I do this? I looked up at my father, raising my head, which had been lowered for a while, and thinking, "I'm fine, Dad. What do I do?" Let the misunderstanding spread, I said with a more angelic smile at my father. My father laughed as he stroked my cheeks with a softer hand. "Don't worry too much, Tia. Belsac will not be able to harass you in the future." Seemed good, but I didn't expect this condition to last long. Just as expected, it was Belsac who I thought had improved his position because he became Astana's friend this time, as well as the last family banquet. And as soon as it happens, he just stepped on my back as if to relieve the resentment. It was obvious, even if I didn't see it, such an idiot's mind. However, no matter how ridiculous I look at Belsac, there's no way to help the obvious difference in physique. I'm still young, and I'm smaller than my peers. Belsac, who is older than me, will increasingly gain that physical advantage, and I am compelled to worry about my future, which will continue to be thorny. Even I thought about what to do to prepare for Belsac's attack, but my grandfather came out like this and solved my worries instead. In fact, if he breaks the order of restraining access, he will be stopped, and Belsac will never linger next to me anymore. And in the future, he won't be able to make up his mind to hit me easily. I know that he is scared of grandfather. Dad, I'm fine now. Can't we go home? At my words, my father stood up and held me lightly. Once it looks like there's no big mark, the doctor said you had to stay in the room for a few days because he didn't know if there are other injuries. People thought I was beaten with a wooden sword by Balzac, so I can't do anything about it. I nodded quietly. As I passed through the darkened corridor in the arms of my father, a group of employees who are returning after finishing their daily routine recognized and greet us. Certainly, wearing a uniform gave them some unity and looked much better. At that time, a maid with an impressive round face with big eyes approached us carefully and asked, "Well, Miss Florentia, are you okay?" I didn't know how to talk to her, so I couldn't answer right away and blinked. "I heard you fell down." Another person came up and said anxiously they weren't the only ones looking at my condition. Others who were going back with us also stopped and listened to our conversation. Originally, I was the one who talks without hesitation with the employees, but I wasn't so popular enough to get everyone's worries. Young Master Belsac is also terrible, such a small and young Miss Florentia. You asked the twin young masters not to hit Master Belsac, even though you were in distress enough to get fainted. Different from the young Master Belsac, you must have been more worried because you feared that the twin young masters would be scolded. Oh no, such a nice girl. There was a whispering sound of several employees from behind. The rumors about me were so glorified that it seemed to be spinning. To live up to their expectations, I responded with an angelic smile, just like I showed my father a little while ago. "I'm all right. Thanks for everyone's concern." A child's pure smile certainly works. At a glance, everyone's facial expressions were relaxed, and their affinity toward me increased. My father thanked them with a glance and began to take the steps that had stopped again. Soon after, I got home and I asked my dad what came to mind. "Father, I heard that the guests are coming to the mansion soon. When is it?" "Ah, you mean the Lombardi scholarship? I heard it's 3 days later. The mansion will be noisy after a long time." 3 days later? That was enough time to say that I had a few days off, so hopefully I might be able to attend the time at the entrance for the banquet. However, I am worried that my grandfather will be too busy for a while because of that. Now I have to move slowly too. I felt a little nervous that the Lombardi scholarship came first. I thoroughly read myself. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Empress, this great tea party. Thank you very much. Beautifully dressed Sarah greeted while bending her knees slightly in front of her cousin Rabini. "Your son Balzac has become my son's friend. I should at least care, Sarah." Rabini also rarely smiled and said, "Originally Balzac came with his parents, spent time with Astana and had dinner together. However, the Empress who received Sarah's letter a few days ago changed all plans. The very next morning, among the high-ranking nobles who had townhouses in Pavalo district, letters were sent to those who had children of the same age as Balzac and Astana. It was an invitation to invite children of aristocrats and their guardians to afternoon tea parties and dinners. The title was Good Tea Leaves Who Have Come In, so let's enjoy it together. But in the end, everyone gathered on the day when Balzac first officially entered the palace. When the nobles' banquet was held, the faces of the other children filled with envy when they saw Balzac, who had played with them, hanging around right next to First Prince. Sarah was very satisfied with it. Lorraine, who is shy, does not play alone today and having a good time in the center of girls her age. Then Sarah sees something and asks permission from the Empress to leave for a while. "Honey," Sarah headed next to Bees, who was sitting at the table alone and drinking tea. "Are you still worried? What am I worried about?" However, Bees' complexion was still the same. "Do you remember what I said?" Sarah smiled and sat next to him, placing her hand on white gloves on Bees' hand. "No matter how strong your father looks right now, time can't be stopped. After a few years, you will be able to do everything you want." "I know, but he's the one who can take everything from us before that." Bees recalled her father's eyes, who were shining blue with anger, and drank the tea anxiously. Originally, he tried to remain in the mansion and attend the Lombardi banquet, but Sarah blocked it. And as planned, he came to the imperial palace, but he's in a cold sweat. He feared as if he had done something bad. "But are you want to follow Galyahan? To be a little more independent?" "I see. What do you mean by that? Your father is implicitly hoping for you to appear a little more like the eldest son. How long have you tried to go against father's will?" Bees nodded with a gloomy face. "Maybe your father will like it. Maybe he wants you to stand up. Even if you are scared, you have to do it. Is it?" Bees was immediately persuaded by his wife's words. The memory that he sat down on his knees and tried to pray was gradually fading, and in that gap, every Cyril's words trickled into it. Because that's obvious. Obviously, at some point, you will be recognized in his heart. Hey, they can't beat me, the eldest son. Another ease of work filled V's heart. Sarah laughed and grabbed her husband's hand and made him stand up. The Empress is waiting for you. Balzac is getting used to First Prince, so you can just do what you were doing. Yes, as usual. Vise regained his normal appearance and smiled, then approached the Empress where people were gathered. On each large table were teacups and teaware exclusively made for the imperial family by craftsmen, and on one side, musicians were creating beautiful music. In the space where the children were playing, there was a thick, flawless green lawn. Each and every element that fills this space was a terribly splendid and gorgeous tea party. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Bella, the maid who was watching the scene from behind the pillars of the Emperor's palace, quickly stepped into the kitchen. Bella, who had already entered the forest with food in her basket, arrived in front of the shabby villa and stopped for a while. Then he took out a small glass bottle from his chest and poured it into the stew in the basket. Because that kid eats all the stew and leaves the hardened bread. It was truly a full-fledged prince. Because there are no commoner children, they leave the bread that they can eat just because it has become hard after a few days. Bella, who had just forgotten about the gorgeous tea party, complained. Bella, who opened the door, screaming in rust, walked in familiarly to the second prince's bedroom. Beep, there wasn't even a knock before opening the bedroom door. She glanced at the back, who, crouching on a large bed in the distance, laid down the food on the table unintentionally and left. Second prince slowly got up from her seat, only after the sound of her footsteps and the sound of the closing of the door of the palace. Perez lifted the basket with an indifferent face and pulled out a stew ball with a spoon embedded in it. She put it a lot. He doesn't know if the maids who bring the food know it. The poison they use is very small, but it has a peculiar aroma and bitter taste. Of course, the average person may not notice, but Perez was different. Perez, who had an exceptionally sensitive sense, could discern taste. The reason why he searched through herbal books for the first time was that the taste of the food changed subtly one day, but knowing that it was poisonous, Perez continued to stew. She says I shouldn't be caught, so eat food and get an antidote. Even though he hadn't eaten a few teaspoons, he ignored his aching stomach and headed back to bed. Then he took out a round glass bottle from under the pillow and lifted it up. Perez's red eyes, drinking medicine as if familiar with it, gazing at the bright, almost bare golden liquid. A small voice seemed to prick Perez in the back of a quiet room. Is she already forgotten about you? But Perez shook his little head. Thanks to it, his pitch-black hair fluttered in the air. No, she can't. Perez cherished the round glass bottle in his arms as if it were his own life. She wouldn't do that. Perez closed his eyes tightly and thought of Florentia. The brown hair fluttering gently in the wind and the green eyes like spring leaves. The tears you shed for me. Perez hugged the round vial for more preciously. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Wow, look, there are a lot of people. He said the mansion was going to be noisy, and it really was. Is there an unusually a large number of people every year? Or maybe I was short and the crowd seemed bigger. Tia, I brought the cake here. Let's drink tea. Grandpa gave us a special opportunity to attend this banquet. Maybe it has something to do with Balzac's visit to the imperial palace today. Whatever the reason, it was a good thing for me. Astalia could not have come to the place without Balzac, and Lorraine also entered the palace with Balzac. The other cousins were too young to move alone. In the end, it was only me and the twins who attended the Lombardy Scholarships banquet. Thank you, you two. It was annoying to have the twins. They stick to me since the last day. But there are quite a few things that are comfortable as they are now. It was a moment when I tried to eat a bite of the cake with a fork. A woman passed by right in front of the table where we were sitting. She, in her early 30s, however, his upright waist and graceful footsteps caught my attention. Found you. I forgot to eat the cake and left. A veteran maid who worked in various directions until the second Prince Perez became the Grand Prince. And the person who can take care of Perez, who is now alone and become a strong support force, Caitlin Brown, the head lady of the Imperial Palace Maid, was seen from a distance. End of chapter 43. Chapter 44. I kept watching her while pushing the sweet cake into my mouth. At first glance, Caitlin seemed to be leisurely enjoying the banquet, but her gaze was busy looking at the Lombardi employees working around her. In that gaze, there was a feeling of warmth and happiness, as if returning home after a long time. At least I thought I knew enough what Lombardi meant to her. Tia, this is really delicious, isn't it? Suddenly, Gilly, who was eating a cake with me, smeared white cream in his mouth and said with a laugh, "Shall I bring more?" Mayron asked, glancing at Gilly. "No, I want to eat something else after a while." "Yes, if you have something you want to eat, tell me." Mayron laughed at me when he tapped on the back of Gilly's hand, who trying to eat the last piece of cake that left over. "Thank you, guys." I smiled as a sign of gratitude and put it in Mayron's mouth. Somehow, Mayron's cheek seemed to be slightly red. He seems to be a little tall these days, but he is still a kid who likes sweet things. I ate the cake too, so I have to take care of it now. As I said that and started moving, the twins quickly followed. It seems I have become a mother duck carrying yellow ducklings, but it is much more unnatural to go around like a child than to snooze alone. Pretending to look around, I gradually approached the table next to Caitlin. Oh, it's Clarivan pellets. I was putting one cookie in the palms of the twins with both hands out, and I heard the man next to them whispering. He was talking while staring at Clarivan on the other side of the banquet hall. Externally, since we weren't good enough to look close, Clarivan was always keeping a distance from me. He's surrounded by women today. It was a conversation that seemed quite dissatisfied with Clarivan. It wasn't just women that were crowded around Clarivan. In fact, even though his attitude toward people was not particularly good, many male bureaucrats tried to stay close to Clairvan at least a little, whether they had the magical power to attract people. But well, there are many women too. Look at that. Do women like that guy who doesn't have politeness? That's right, I wanted to tell those bitter losers. That face, the face is the probability. But since I was busy now, I glanced at the man with pathetic eyes and continued to move table by table, and finally I succeeded in moving to Caitlin's table. Now I have to talk to her. It was that when I was rolling my head like that. "Excuse me," a soft voice came from behind. Huh? It was Caitlin, who stood just 3 steps away from us and bowed his knees to greet us. "I'm Caitlin Brown." I thought about how I would deal with her, but I'm lucky she comes to me first. "Do you know us?" When Gilio asked with eyes wide open, Caitlin smiled a little. Shouldn't immediately know the people from Lombardy, but it seems that everyone here doesn't know who we are. Myron tilted his head. Because the respect for Lombardi is different, the behavior is bound to be different. It meant that his love for Lombardi was special enough to be interested in us, who are still children. Suddenly, I remembered one day when I was standing next to my grandfather helping work. Caitlin, a middle-aged woman, visited grandfather and had a brief interview on a day when it rained so much that it was difficult to see. And on the way out, she walked out of the mansion while getting all the rain. Still, I haven't forgotten for a while as I keep looking back. Even though he helped Perez and betrayed Lombardi to take revenge on the enemies of the Brown family, he was truly depressed. "Hello, I'm called Florentia." I said hello as politely and neatly as possible. "The last time I saw you, you were just a walking baby. You grew up really wonderfully." Certainly, the affection of Caitlin's eyes that looked at me was sincere. First of all, I should make a good impression by saying something good to her to hear. What compliment she would like. I thought about the right words to think about. I asked Caitlin with my eyes wide open. "By the way, if it's the Brown family, it's a very famous family for swordsmanship." "Oh, my lady, how do you know the name of our family?" Caitlin seemed surprised but was very happy. Caitlin's younger brother, who will soon inherit the lord title from his uncle, is known to have a very close relationship with her. Although he works alone in the fortress, his affection for his family and her remains strong. Those two men talked about the basic imperial swordsmanship, blah blah blah. So, when I was curious, I looked for a book and I found out that the basic imperial swordsmanship was originally called Brown Basic Swordsmanship. I wasn't lying. In fact, the twins' curiosity about Brown family swordsmanship has grown since the beginning of learning the swordsmanship class. Therefore, the Brown family was greatly influenced and respected by the imperial prosecutor. Even though the ranks of the family completely collapsed after the disgrace of being expelled from their estates that had been ruled from generation to generation about 40 years ago. Caitlin also grew up in Lombardy when her family fell and there was nowhere to go, and after reaching adulthood, she entered the imperial palace as a maid. It's such an excellent swordsmanship. The whole imperial people would have learned it and even named it imperial swordsmanship. As I talked with the little Ross, Caitlin's face turned slightly red. It's a word of praise. Then the twins were excited and asked Caitlin with a loud voice, Really? Really someone of that Brown family? It's embarrassing. Wow. It was such a big cheer that a few people standing around turned to us. Then Caitlin learned swords too? To my question, Caitlin showed her open palm with calluses. I'm learning in a short time, so I can barely protect myself. The Brown family said that women also learn swordsmanship, so it was true. The twins couldn't bite their mouths as if they would even join the Brown family fan club. "So don't you hold the sword now? What does Caitlin do?" I deliberately asked for her job. "I work in the Imperial Palace, my lady." Fortunately, Caitlin gave me the answer I was hoping for. In fact, she is not simply a person working in the Imperial Palace. She was the chief of the Imperial Palace Maid. It was the 3 female chiefs who had the real power since they were held by an older maid and maintained as an honorary post. I clapped my hands as if startled and said, "I've been to the palace before with my father in the palace of the Empress." "The Empress Palace? Was that so?" The word Empress Palace gave Caitlin's face a brief dark look, but she smiled for the little ones soon after. "Yes, but none of it was fun except for making friends." friend? Caitlin tilted his head all the way. Yes, I was lost in the Imperial Palace, but I was as depressed as possible and said in a small voice. But even now, I'm worried about that friend. He said he was sick. He said he was alone. Miss, Caitlin called me anxiously. It's nothing, but if you work in such an imperial palace, aren't you scared? As I turned to the Emperor's story, Caitlin shook his head. It's okay because I have His Majesty the Emperor. Ah, that's right, I don't mean it sincerely. The Empress can't do what he can do to the person the Emperor trusts. But what about the feeling of having to see the face of the Empress from Angenas who messed up his family? Besides, there's no way that Rabini knows that Caitlin, the chief maid, is from the Browns family. My respect to for Caitlin. If I were like her, I wouldn't have served the Empress for long. After that, for quite some time, I continued talking with Caitlin, and by the time the banquet was over, I could have confidence. The character and prudence were worthy of the title of chief mate. Loyalty to Lombardy, knowledge and experience of swordsmanship, and above all, hostility to Angenas, which is unavoidably reflected in the middle. That Caitlin is perfect as Paris foster and guardian. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Caitlin Brown, Lord is looking for you. Caitlin, seeing the Lord's cute granddaughter and grandson moving away by waving her little hand with a bright smile, turned to the sound calling her name. It was Marvin Dillard, Dillard's first son. According to the will of the Lord, the scholarship is held several times a year and is hosted by a person from a different family each time. This time it was the turn of the Dillard family. As it is a large event, it would be efficient if one person took over it. But there was a reason for all of these methods. Caitlin followed Marvin Dillard's footsteps and walked the familiar path. After a while, the two arrived in front of the Lord's office. As if it was Caitlin's turn, Caravan was exiting from the door. It's been a while, Caitlin. Caravan is still there. The two people who once lived in the Lombardy mansion were well acquainted. The Lord is waiting. Clarivan opened the door to the office in good manners. Thank you, Caitlin said with a small smile. Clarivan gave a small bow to Marvin Dillard, then turned his back and walked. This guy. Marvin Dillard knitted a little when he saw Clarivan's back. Was those two people so close? Caitlin tilted her head and stepped into the office. There were only two people in the room, Lulak and Caitlin. There was neither a secretary nor a butler in the office. The atmosphere is completely different from the chattering and friendly banquets outside. There was a chair without armrests in front of the desk in the office, which seemed to be huge every time. Caitlin, breathing silently, sat in the chair. That nervous personality doesn't change. Lulak said with a smile at that appearance. Yes, Lord. Caitlin greeted politely. So what kind of news did you bring today? Lulak asked right away, without making a fuss. This is the reason why the Lombardi family holds scholarships, even at the enormous expenses each time, and the reason why the family that hosts a banquet is different every time. The second Prince Perez Nani was found dead. The scholarship is a way for Lombardy Lord to sit in his office and take a peek into the entire empire. It was information gathering days. End of chapter 44. Chapter 45. Dead? Lulak asked again while pulled up himself away from the back of the chair. Yes, 2 days ago she was found in the southern part of the Server River. If she was found near the water, it would be difficult to find out her identity. Even though she was found near the Server River, but the cause of death was not drowning. Her both hands were tied, so it must be done by humans. Lulak clicked his tongue. What should I do? Caitlin asked carefully. Now it is confirmed that his nanny is dead. What should I do? She muttering, and her facial look wasn't good. The second prince disappeared from the imperial palace where she worked, and for a long time his whereabouts were unknown. Apparently Caitlin felt very responsible for this job. Caitlin, yes, Lord. You just have to live your life. Then, when you come across information that might be of use to Lombardy, you just have to remember it and let me know. However, Caitlin squeezed her dress so tight that it was wrinkled. Did the others hear anything, Lord? It was taboo to ask for the information that other people brought here. The scholarship members carried very little information, so Lulak gathered them together to hear about it. Knowing it well, Caitlin took the courage to ask. There is no other intention. It is only because the existence of the second prince is very important to Lombardy, so even Lulak didn't reprimand Caitlin. He just looked up and admitted that Caitlin was right. Isn't that hilarious, Caitlin? Even if he is a prince, a child who doesn't even have a presence like him is someone I need. It was a sentence of justification mixed with laughter. The reason why Lulak was looking for the second prince was simple. It was to check Anjana's power, that is, Empress Rabini. The most absolute card that the Empress possesses is that she is the Emperor's wife and the mother of his only son. The Emperor apparently had one more son, but nothing. The Emperor's attitude that pretended not to know about the seeds he sowed gave the Empress even more opportunities. It's because I moved too late. Lulak was disappointed. If he knew a little bit earlier that the second prince's mother was dying, he can just put the second prince under Lombardy's protection. Without realizing it, the Empress dared to interfere with the issue of Lulak's inheritance. And Janas keeps snooping around what's going on under my roof, but I have to take my hands off and see. Ravine and Janas is involved in Lombardy's affairs, pretending to be a V supporter, but there is nothing Lulak can do. Now it was very clear the second prince was well hidden, so he couldn't even find a reason to face the empress. Lulak frowned even more. Is he already dead? It was said that the villa in the forest where the second prince lived with his mother had been vacated for a long time. The presence of the second prince and his servants was not noticeable in the abandoned separate palace, which was like a ruin. So Lulak ordered Caitlin and the other scholarship members working in the imperial palace to find the whereabouts of the second prince's nanny. It was because he thought that the second prince and the nanny would have been sent together, somewhere in the land owned by Angenes. But the nanny was found dead in the southern part of Server River. There was a high probability that the second prince's body could not be found and drifted along the river. In the imperial palace filled with adults, it shouldn't be difficult to find him and his maid. Lulak shook his head and lamented. The first prince are the only children living in the imperial palace. Lulak decided it was time to stop looking for the second prince. I heard from young miss. Something went through Caitlin's head as she listened. Yes, she said when attending Empress invitation, none of it was fun, except for making friends. It was Florentia's word, whom she had met a while ago. Caitlin thought about what she had heard. She said he was sick and alone. Alone? Until now, under the command of Lulak, they were targeting a combination of children and court ladies. It was because he didn't think that the Empress would have left the second prince alone. But what if she hides the second prince alone, then moves the nanny to trick us? Caitlin carefully opened her mouth to tell Lulak, who seemed to be pondering. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Grandpa, I'm here. I was just about to have dinner with Shannonette and the twins after hearing the news that my father was late again. The butler came and told me that my grandfather was looking for me. When I entered the room, there was a simple meal on the table like last time. Our Tia is here. I called you to eat with this grandfather. I like it too. I did something? Maybe he just wanted to have dinner with his granddaughter. I settled down and sat next to my grandfather and began to eat. Now eat this too. This too. Grandfather stroked my head when he pushed the delicious foods in front of me. Eat yours too, Grandpa. It's delicious. When I put the third piece of meat into my mouth, the grandfather who looked at me asked, Let's hear it. Doesn't he have a friend? A friend? Yes, in the imperial palace. I was off guard. I hid my embarrassment while pretending to chew meat. What would a typical 8-year-old child react to his grandfather's question? Go. After swallowing a chunk of meat, I put the fork down. How did Grandpa know that? I opened my eyes and raised my voice, pretending to be startled. Young children still do not know about the complicated relationships of adults. What I talked to Caitlin about friends in the Imperial Palace doesn't have any other intention. It's just because of my anxiety and longing for a friend. I talked back to my grandfather. He laughed while pinching my cheek a little so that my cheek wouldn't hurt. I heard it from Caitlin about a friend you didn't tell this grandfather. Do you know how sad I was? Grandpa also said with a smile without signs of anger. Yeah, I have a friend when I went to the Imperial Palace with my dad before. It was when I got lost. I was afraid of being scolded. So, are you lost? Probably my father ordered the people to join forces. There is no need to consider the Empress and the Emperor. My father is really nice. The problem is that I can't be that nice too. Yes, suddenly scary knights stopped the carriage and told me and my dad to get off. They fight with my dad and angry, so I got off too, but I got scared. As soon as my grandfather heard it, he seemed to notice who had ordered it. He gritted his teeth and coughed when he saw my eyes. Then he asked again in a soft voice, So what kind of child is Tia's friend? Is he a friend of the same age as Tia? Yes, he 3 years older than me. He has very dark hair and his eyes are red like a rabbit. Grandpa's eyes were no longer smiling. I quickly added, When I got lost in the Imperial Palace, he helped me. Yes, that's a good child. But my friend lives alone without a mother or nanny. He looked so lonely and sick, Grandpa. My grandfather stroked my head and his hand stopped. Alone? Yes, that's why he said he envied me for having so many families. Oh, but my grandfather's reaction didn't seem like he was going to run to the Imperial Palace right away, as I thought. Damn it, at first glance it seemed like a sympathetic voice, but I know my grandfather's way of speaking. You have a lot of thoughts, aren't you? Maybe today the scholarship members brought a lot of information. Everyone would have come in when grandfather called, and they would have put down what they knew and went out. If I leave it like this, I don't know how many days or weeks it will take grandfather to move. No, I wonder if he would even try to get involved in Perez' work. But Perez doesn't have time to do that. I originally planned to use the birthday gift voucher that I had to go with my grandfather to see my friend at the Imperial Palace. Although I told Caitlin only a little bit of information, it helped me inadvertently. Unlike my father, it's not easy to get involved with my grandfather, to be sure. I thought about it for a while and made a decision. I have to give grandfather the reason why he has to move quickly. And when I hesitated, my grandfather reassured me, Don't worry, you can say anything to Grandpa. I wriggled my fingers and said boldly, and he said he was sick. Someone is hurting my friend. I bowed my head while making a sad expression as much as possible. Someone is trying to hurt him. Grandpa still didn't say anything. I said again while holding onto my grandfather's sleeves, Grandpa, can't you help me? Certainly, the granddaughter's earnest request worked, and the grandfather's cold expression shakes. My grandfather, who looked at me with a complicated face, asked in a soft voice, What is your friend's name, Florentia? Looks like he needs confidence. I replied again and again. Perez, my friend's name is Perez, Grandpa. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The The moonlight night was deep. Lulak Lombardi poured a drink and looked out the window. It's been a while since his granddaughter Florentia returned to her room, but Lulak's worries did not end. When he knew where the second prince was, another thought approached him. There were many things to consider. The information brought by those who had come before Caitlin was entangled, and his hair was almost mirrorless. But it was because of the problem about his family that complicated Lulak's mind more than any politics and interests. Lulak, who had emptied the drink halfway, stood and wiggled the bell. After a while, the butler quietly opened the door and entered. John, yes, Lord, is Bees back? He was the first son who ignored Lulak's warning and picked up his wife and children early in the morning. That is, John, the deacon, answered reluctantly. A little while ago, a letter came from the coachman. It seems that V's family is likely to stay at the Imperial Palace tonight. He seems to attend the Imperial Palace banquet tomorrow evening. Lulak hadn't said anything for a while. The butler couldn't figure it out, so he waited quietly, bowing his back. After a while, Lulak said in a low voice, I see, that's the decision he made. Click, the sound of putting a cup on the window sill can be heard in the office. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Tia, would you like to wake up for a moment? I woke up while rubbing my sleepy eyes with a hand that shook me. Dad, the first thing I saw in a dark room was my father. My father, wearing only a silk robe in his pajamas, woke me up with a confused face. Are you very sleepy? Yeah, it's okay, but why? I think Tia should get up a little earlier today. There is no way my father wakes me up before dawn for nothing. I woke up like I had jumped into icy water while my father continued to glance behind the half-closed door. I quickly got out of bed and opened the door barefoot. Likewise, grandfather was sitting on the couch in the dark living room. Oh, did you wake up? Like a person who woke up after a single sleep all day. A grandfather with a lively voice was already ready from head to toe. When he saw me holding the doorknob, my grandfather said with a smile, Wouldn't you like to go to the Imperial Palace with this grandfather, Florentia? End of chapter 45.